you get into the industry and yeah, I didn't get a huge budget for promo from my publisher, which is, again, it's not abnormal. It's a debut novel. When they're setting the budgets for promotion, they kind of have to make some bets and say, which books do we think are we confident are going to make it? Yeah, I'm an unknown entity at the point, right? It's a debut novel. They don't know anything about me, and I don't have an existing fan base. So it makes sense that they can't necessarily, just decide to pour a bunch of resources into a book that might flop.
What is up, everybody? You're listening to episode 36 of SFF Addicts. I'm your host, Adrian M. Gibson, and welcome to your weekly dive into the world of science fiction and fantasy. We are so excited that the official SFF Addicts Patreon and merch store are now live, so check the links in the description to support what we do here, get access to Patreon-exclusive bonus episodes, author readings, and more, and purchase t-shirts, mugs, notebooks, and all kinds of cool swag. Also, don't forget to rate and review the podcast on your favorite podcast app, and subscribe to the FanFiAddict YouTube channel, where this and every other episode of the show is available in full video. And now, joining us once again, my co-host, the talented MJ Kuhn, author of Among Thieves. How's it going, MJ?
Hi, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good.
So just a heads up to everyone who's listening or watching, this is part 2 of a 2-part interview with MJ. So I recommend checking out part 1 just to get to know her a bit more. Today, though, we are delving into a mini masterclass on being a debut author, which is a fraught experience for many people.
It's loaded. It's a loaded topic.
But to start off, just because you're a debut author, MJ, that doesn't mean that Among Thieves was the first book that you wrote. And we brought this up in episode 35 as well. But how many books did you write before that book got published?
So I've been asked this question a number of times, and I'm pretty sure I've given different answers several times.
40.
That's I don't remember exactly. It's either 4 or 5.
Okay.
But it's because I lose track because I started writing a trilogy and I wrote the first 2 books of it. And then I went back and I decided to rewrite those 2 books and the uncompleted 3rd book into one big book. And then I started different. So I forget where I left off with any of these. And then it didn't matter anyways, because that trilogy that I rewrote into one book, I scrapped it anyway. So
Yeah.
none of it ended up mattering. It was fine. But either way, Among Thieves, and that's the thing. So either 4 or 5 before Among Thieves, and Among Thieves wasn't even the book that I signed with my first agent on. So I wrote either 3 or 4 books, and then I wrote another book, and that one I queried and got an agent with, and we worked on that book and took it on submission. And after about a year of it sitting on submission and not selling, we decided to switch gears to Among Thieves. So yeah, it was a journey to even get to the debut journey.
The pre-debut journey.
Yes, exactly. It was like step 1 lasted for 6 years before we got, to the next step. But, that's pretty normal. I feel like a lot of the authors that I know, it's very rare. There's only a few that I've talked to that their debut novel is actually the first book that they wrote. I think I can only think of 1 or 2 people I know offhand. So it's not all that uncommon to have a bunch of trunked novels sitting in an old hard drive somewhere.
Yeah. But for you, what was it? So it's like this trilogy, you wrote 2 books, then went back and combined them into 3 in 1, and then wrote another one after this. It was in all this convoluted history, at which point were you just thinking this isn't good enough? So it's what if it's finished or not, whether I have to scrap it, or the book that you went to query with for the first time. Why, what was going through your head when you were thinking this book is good enough, or this book needs to be, pushed aside and sit on the hard drive or whatever?
Yeah, it was a process to learn that, I will say. So actually the book I signed with my agent, or my first agent on, is not even the first book I queried. So the very first book I wrote, I queried that, and I'm so sorry to every agent on that list. Because, it wasn't that strong. I didn't know how to write a novel yet. I was, super young, and I was very, I wouldn't quite say I was cocky, but I was a little cocky, right? I was very confident. I had been, a strong writer in all my English classes growing up
Mhm.
and like whatever. And,
I got
it
A's in
was
high school.
right, exactly. It's like, and it's a process to learn that like being good at writing and being good at writing novels are not necessarily the same thing.
Yeah.
Writing a novel, it's a whole different skill set you have to learn.
Mhm.
And so I did query that project, and I got all rejections. I got all form rejections. I didn't even get a single personalized rejection on that first novel. It was because the query letter was quite weak at the time as well. I didn't really know, I didn't know anything about the industry. I was brand new at all of it. But it shattered my soul to get just like completely like shut out for that first book.
Mhm.
Um, so after that, I wrote like 2 or 3 books before I even started querying again. It was like I kept writing projects and being like, "No, it's not good enough." And then writing, "No, it's not good enough." You know what I mean? Um, so it was a process to get there. I will say though, by the time I queried that second book, I only sent out 2 queries and I got offers on both. Um, so I mean, a lot of that is I just got lucky.
Mhm.
But I think a lot of it too is that I took so long to like really hone that query letter and that pitch, and make sure that it was as strong as humanly possible. And then the stars aligned and I caught the right agents on the right day. You know what I mean? It
Mhm.
was a lot of things. Um, but yeah, then I actually just recently had to go back into the query trenches again. It's never over. It's never over, friends. I'm here to rain on all the parades. But no, my first agent was fantastic. I loved working with them, but they left the industry. They decided
Mhm.
to pursue a different dream. And I support them for that forever. But it was very stressful. It meant I had to go back into the query trenches in between my debut and my
Oh, that's
sophomore
so rough.
novel. It was a very stressful summer. It was, I spent the entire summer trying to hone different query letters and get different projects maybe ready to pitch and all that stuff.
Mhm.
And then ended up signing with my wonderful second agent now, or my new agent, just in October. So,
Mm.
yeah, it's a process forever. And there's lots of rejection for everyone all the time. And it's great.
So much fun. It's so,
It's
like,
so fun.
emotionally strenuous, but I wanna kinda circle back a little bit because it's like you've
Yeah.
been touching on, like, queering and everything like this, but I was curious for you, like, why was, you know, you're approaching this world, with a bit of, like, naive eyes at the beginning, but why was it in your mind, traditional publishing was the path that you wanted to go down?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I feel like a lot of people in the like I think actually less so now, or maybe I'm just running in cooler circles where people are like more open to like people doing what they want to do.
Mhm.
But I do feel like in the past I've encountered a lot of like, anyone that does trad pub is a hack, and anyone that does, you know what I mean, or sellout,
Yeah.
and anyone that does self pub is whatever. And I don't subscribe to that at all. I think that it's just whatever's the right fit for you, and even for the project. And I think so for me, I wanted to go the trad pub route because I knew what I didn't know. You know what I mean? I didn't have any experience in marketing. I didn't have a platform at all. I didn't have any contacts in for cover art, or had even the faintest idea of how to, format a book or anything. And all of that is, stuff I could have learned, and stuff that, now I kind of am just interested in learning it, even if I don't end up self-pubbing ever,
Yeah.
just because it's fascinating to me.
Mhm.
Um, but I won't lie, I really liked the idea of having a team of people behind the project, uh, second eyes, third eyes, fourth eyes on the book to make sure that, what I was putting out into the world was, truly the best I could possibly make it before it hit readers' eyes. And personally, I felt like since I didn't have the money to hire an editor, um, TradPub was my best bet for that.
No, that's totally fair. I mean, you know, like I started this podcast basically learn from other authors. It's just like I'm just gonna put like, you know, like free classes in the form of this like thinly veiled podcast.
I love it though.
But
I love it because it's such a like a it's a very opaque industry for the business
yeah,
side of things,
yeah.
but also it's I feel like it's such a trial and error thing for the creative side of it that the
Mhm.
more you can learn about what other people do and why they do it. Sure, a lot of it is going to be stuff where you're like, I am never going to do it that way, but you're
Yeah.
going to get one or two little nuggets that you might just adopt into your process forever. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think it's very cool.
Yeah, and it's like the like doing an episode on cover art and cover artists and doing episodes on like traditional indie self-publishing and kind of like compare contrast kind of stuff. These are the ones where it's just like, holy shit, there is so much that I don't know, but it's
Yes.
so cool that there are people who are willing to come on here and talk and share what they've learned. Cause I feel like, you know, going into it blind, especially with something like self-publishing,
Oh my gosh, right?
where it's like
Terrifying.
you have to be more like entrepreneurial in that sense. Whereas like I totally agree with you on the trad side of things where it's like to have a team, like a set of professional
Yes.
eyes to be able to um, you know, re-evaluate like aspects of your work and help you to reiterate and improve everything that you're
Yes.
doing. Whereas like on the self-publishing side, it's like, oh, it has to be so self-directed. And it's like if you really strike gold as an author in self-pub, usually not with your debut, unless you're
Yeah.
like Ryan Cahill or some, you know,
Yeah.
someone like that. Where it's like, you know, you're fucking talented, Ryan. I appreciate you. Um, but at the same time, like so many people, even if they're in traditional publishing, it's
Yeah.
really difficult to get that attention or hit that stride. Like you mentioned before, like have a platform.
Yes.
And you know, it's like we'll touch on this a little bit later in terms of like this social media presence thing. But on the team aspect, in terms of what you went through working with Saga Press, who was the publisher that picked up Among Thieves, what was it like for you when you actually like sat down and met the different people in the publishing staff, whether it was like the editors, going through things like the cover art process and all that kind of stuff?
So I had a weird experience. I feel like it's less weird in the current climate, though, just with how everything's going. But if I had to describe just in one word, it's stressful. It's been very stressful.
Yeah.
I had a lot of turnover in my team. So just to kind of in the US alone, so we're not even counting like my UK team and all that stuff, just the US. In the time between me signing the deal for Among Thieves and it hitting shelves, uh, I went through 3 editors and 3 publicists.
Wow.
Um, right, just because, and gosh, we all know publishing
The
as an
publishing industry
industry,
is crazy right now.
it's
Yeah.
crazy. It expects long hours and, it's going through a bit of, I hope, a reinvention of itself where maybe it'll make the conditions more enjoyable so that people want to stay longer.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, but it's just been kind of hemorrhaging people. And I experienced a lot of that. I will say every single person I worked with was really nice and kind and great. But it was really hard and stressful to keep losing people. And then there would be, big stretches of time where I didn't have an editor and my book was kind of homeless for a couple weeks or months. And then
Hmm.
I didn't have a publicist because, we're shuffling around and figuring out where we're going to put, so and so's books now that they've left the industry.
Yeah.
Um, so it makes it a bit stressful. It's definitely not just me that went through this. A lot of debuts, particularly, when I tell people that don't work in publishing or aren't in the book community, just people from my like regular outside of the internet life,
Yeah.
about all the turnover, they're like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. And I'm like, it is, but also think about, I signed the deal for Among Thieves in 2019, like mid 2019.
Hmm.
The book came out in late 2021. It's more than 2 years. in
Yeah.
your company, how many people have left in 2 years, right? Like, it's kind of normal turnover. It's just the timelines are so long. So, but I mean, honestly, probably the most fun part of the process was the cover art.
Mhm.
So Christian McGrath does the cover art for Among Thieves and for Thick as Thieves, and it's fantastic. Just a brilliant
He's
and a wizard.
what the Dresden Files is like probably his most well-known covers, but I think
Yeah.
he also does stuff for Brandon Sanderson and
Yeah, he's done stuff like
yeah.
some Halo books are
Mhm.
his cover art, and yeah. So, and I was a fan of him as a cover artist before they, Saga approached me and was like, "We're thinking of having Christian McGrath do your cover art," and I was like, "Here,
Please.
I'm sorry, yes, please." Yeah, so it was great. I had very little to do with the cover art for Among Thieves. They basically just asked, if I wanted a person on the cover, and I said, yeah, I thought it would be cool to have like maybe the opening scene of the novel on the cover.
Hatchet.
Yeah, and the hatchets, and like literally that was pretty much all I did, except for then at the end they sent me 2 versions of the cover. One was like a gray tone and one was the blue, and I picked the blue.
Mm.
And that
Oh,
was
good
it.
choice.
Yeah, thank you. I thought so. But that was like literally all I had to do. So it's my favorite when people compliment the cover art because I just get to be like, "Oh my god, isn't it beautiful?" Because I didn't do anything. It's like
I
it's
picked
not
the
even.
tone.
Yeah, it's not even like crappy for me to accept the compliment because it's not even they're not even complimenting me. Like,
Yeah. But there's the one with the, I think it's the UK version with like the lime green spine, and then the
yes,
US like North American version, which is like all wraparound blue. Um,
yes.
so what was the decision there? Because it's like, even though I love my copy, I'm like, I want the green spine,
Right?
you
I
know?
know, I love that bright spine, yeah. That was, so Galance is my publishing house for Among Thieves in the UK, and,
Mhm.
they loved the cover art, but they wanted to just, I don't
Spruce
know,
it up.
switch it up a little bit, yeah, for the UK market, which is the funniest thing, my editor over there told me that the font on the cover of the US edition is not a very UK font. And I thought
What
that
does
was
that
funny
mean?
because I don't know. I have literally no clue. But the font for the UK edition is much different. It's much more cursive and curly looking. So um, I don't know what that means, but that is apparently why they changed the font.
All these
Um,
fucking straight edge Americans can't deal
right,
with
right.
like
So boring. Ugh.
flow.
Yeah, so I don't know, but I love it.
Yeah.
And then it's funny because they sent me um like a mock-up of it with that bright color and
Mhm.
which is like it's like a highlighter yellowy greenish color. And I was like, I love that it's a different color, but like what if we tried it in orange? And they sent it to me in orange and it looked like shit. So this is why I
Yeah.
don't do it. This is why I don't do it. I was like, never mind, never mind. I take it back. Do what you guys thought you were doing. Yep, you nailed it the first time. Forget I
Yeah.
said anything. Um, but this is why I'm not a visual artist. I don't have
Yeah.
that skill set. But yeah, so that was a fun part of the process, getting to, see an artist's interpretation of what
Yeah.
my character in my world kind of looks like was really fun.
Yeah.
So
And we brought it up earlier. It's like all these different aspects of like, you have the support of, even though there's this like flux that's constantly going on, you even brought it up with your agent, even though that's separate from the publisher. But you know, the whole thing about like social media presence and having a platform, despite being published by a big publishing house, um, what was your experience like in terms of support from like the marketing side of things? And how much effort did you have to put in on your own, whether it was like marketing on and like TikTok and different social media platforms, to setting up interviews and all that kind of thing? And was it different from what you thought traditional publishing would have offered you?
yes. So it was a lot different from what I was expecting. It was so funny. One of the main reasons why and not the only reason, right? But one big reason why I didn't want to explore self-publishing was because I knew I didn't have the know-how or the platform to market the book myself. I wanted the oomph, the weight of a big publisher, or at least, even a smaller publisher, a traditional publisher behind me to help with that. And you get into the industry, and yeah, I didn't get a huge budget for promo from my publisher, which is, again, it's not abnormal. It's a debut novel.
Hmm.
when they're setting the budgets for promotion, they kind of have to make some bets and say, which books do we think, are we confident are going to make it? And I'm an unknown entity at the point, right? It's a debut novel. They don't know anything about me, and I don't have an existing fan base. So it makes sense that they can't necessarily, just decide to pour a bunch of resources into a book that might flop. I did get, I will say, in terms of like production, distribution, and like all of that, I got incredible support, which is nothing to sneeze at. It's in Barnes and Nobles across the country. It's just huge kind of marketing just through placement, right? As far as that goes. But like, as far as legwork that I did myself, I've
busted
planned.
your ass.
Dude, I kind of did. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's a journey, and I organized my own cover reveals. So like, a lot of the bigger books will get like a splashy cover reveal on Tor.com or whatever like that. And so I wasn't sure what to expect. And that just wasn't the case. They didn't end up setting stuff like that up, which was fine. I just ended up making cool friends with, actually in this case, FanFiAddict, our friends there. And was like, hey, can we do a cover reveal together? And of course, David agreed, and it was great. But yeah, so I also, for book one, I scheduled all my own launch events. So, there wasn't, anything set up in terms of like, oh, we're going to put you in conversation with this author and get you in this, that, and the other thing. I just ended up, finding some other authors in my space and reaching out and saying, hey, do you want to do an Instagram live with me? Will you do a TikTok live with me? And set up those kind of launch events myself. At the time, bookstores weren't open because they released during COVID. But for my sequel, I have found an indie bookstore locally, and I've set up a launch event there. Nice. So yeah, I'm really excited about that.
Cool.
Shout out Sidetrack Bookshop. They're awesome. The people there are so great. But yeah, I scheduled myself podcast interviews. I scheduled signings at some different bookstores in my area. And I have actually ended up figuring out how to hand sell my own books through my publisher properly. So I've attended several festivals and like purchased table space at those, and like, hacked my books by hand to the local readers, which is fun because then you get to meet, local book people, which is great. But yeah,
and then they get to see how just like quirky and weird and wonderful you are.
They're like, this girl's a weirdo. She won't stop smiling at me. I guess I'll buy her books so she goes away.
Exactly, just like, leave me alone.
Right? Like, okay, fine, I'll take the book. Just leave me alone.
It has heists.
Smile them. Yeah.
Thieves.
Right? Please take it.
Moral
You're
greatness.
Gonna love it. But like, really, that is kind of how it feels to try to sell your book by hand. It's very awkward. But yeah, and in terms of blurbs, I didn't know, what would happen with the blurbs from like, other authors. So and so says this book is great. So my publicity team was great, and they got it out to the trade publications. So, we got a really good blurb from like Publishers Weekly through my pub team. But, any of the blurbs from authors, I went out and got all of those myself as well. So, yeah, it's really funny that that's the reason I went the trad route, or a big reason was so that I could not have to learn how to do marketing for my book. And instead, I did learn how to do marketing for my book in a lot of ways. But I think it's better. I think it's for the best. These are really valuable skills for any writer to have. And I got the chance to like learn them on the fly. And now I kind of, have some skills that I can further improve upon for later books, and hopefully, keep marketing.
Yeah, it's just kind of this weird sort of shift within the publishing industry where it's like, I think a lot of publishers have seen what self-pub authors do, and now they kind of expect a lot of their trad pub authors to pick up the slack when it comes to some of these things. Was like doing a lot of your own marketing. It's like you say, there's like the production side of things and the distribution, which is huge.
Yes, which is huge.
But at the same time, it's like to get your face out there and put yourself in these different situations where you can promote your book. A lot of it's like, okay, social media is kind of like this monstrous entity within the world that we inhabit. And so it's kind of like, yeah, just do your own thing over there, and
you scream into the void, have fun,
figure it out for your fucking self, man. But like with all of the work that you put in, after Among Thieves was published and you had Thick as Thieves already ready to go, but you went through so many struggles to get that book published.
I
So,
did.
you know, tell me about
Woo!
the process of getting that book picked up and how it was for you in terms of um kind of like mentally processing this as a debut author who had this book ready to go and it's like the sequel to the book that you published in the first place, and at the same time you're having to do so much legwork in terms of push to get the book in front of more people and kind of validate the sort of um the need.
Presence of an audience for it
Exactly,
even.
like the need for this
Yes.
book to get out there, you know?
Yeah. Well, and it's again, it's one thing where it's like I don't want it to come across like I am, like dunking on Trad Pub, because it is hard. They have limited, budgets and limited numbers of books they can take on, and
Yeah.
I genuinely believe that all of the like folks on the like working directly with authors side of publishing, I'm not sure about all the super higher up folks, but the people that I've worked with are awesome people, and if they could spend $1 million on every single author's book, they would.
Mhm.
But that's not the case, right? It's capitalism and there's limited resources.
Sales
So
metrics and all that fun
right, yeah.
shit.
Oh gosh, these companies that have to like actually make money to stay afloat. What?
Yeah.
Um but so, they have to every time they're signing a book, they're taking a risk. And every time an editor kind of even sticks their neck out for a book, they're taking a risk, right? I
Yeah.
would imagine that if they stick their neck out for a book and it really flops, it probably is challenging for them on the back end of things. So the first time I pitched the sequel to my publishing house was it ended up being bad timing. It ended up being right in the middle of an editor turnover. So I think maybe things got wrong, like missed or something. I'm not sure what happened, but the 30 days for the option clause lapsed and they ended up passing. And I was devastated, right? Because it's just a devastating experience to get a pass anyways.
Mhm.
But especially since I felt so strongly that the rest of the story needed to be shared for it to feel complete for me. And then I will say I I saw so many reviews after that, which don't read your own reviews, people don't do it. Do as I say, not as I do.
That
But
save that for some
yeah, I know.
so
Um,
tidbit of like, don't fucking do it. Stay off
don't
Goodreads.
do it.
Stay off
Yeah,
Amazon.
exactly. Save yourself. But I was reading a few reviews, and like several of them were like, "This is a 3-star. It would have been a 4-star, but it said it was a standalone, and I feel like the story doesn't end." And I was like, gonna rip my hair out of my skull because I was like, there's more. I have it written already. Like it's ready to
Yeah.
go. I just can't share it. And at that point, I wasn't even feeling comfortable with talking about the fact that there was a sequel because I didn't have anything under contract. And, I wasn't allowed to talk about anything really because
Yeah.
publishing everything is always very hush hush. Um, so yeah, it was really stressful. We had to go through a bunch of different options. Maybe we were going to try to pitch it just to my UK publisher and see if they were going to pick it up, or maybe I was going to try to just self-publish the sequel. My agent at the time and I talked through a whole bunch of different options. Because for me, the priority was just getting the book into readers' hands,
Yeah.
whichever readers might decide
Changing
they
that
want it.
3 to a 4, baby.
Right? Exactly. Let's go update some Goodreads reviews. But like there were people. I'm not gonna say it's not like Among Thieves was a big runaway bestseller and there's huge audiences clamoring for it. But there were readers, and I knew that a lot of those readers cared about what happened to these characters, and I wanted to
Yeah.
share the rest of the story with them. But yeah, so it ended up that the publisher didn't want to pick it up because the pre-order numbers for the paperback edition of Among Thieves were too low, which again is fair. They're looking at the numbers and deciding what they're going to put their bets on.
Mhm.
And at the time, it didn't look like Among Thieves was going to be it. But then, like a couple months later, I got a random surprise phone call from my agent that they changed their mind and they wanted to pick it up. Like it was just like a random Wednesday or whatever. And we hadn't even contacted them about it. Like it's not even like we were pestering them.
Yeah.
Um, I found out later it was because my wonderful editor Amara was really going to bat for it. behind the scenes, like day in and day out. Her and my publicist at the time, Kaylee, were both really talking it up at the house and fighting for it. So I'm forever grateful to both of them for that. But it's funny, the day I got the call that the sequel had been picked up was the day after my mom had pre-ordered her paperback copy of Among Thieves. So we always joke that like that was the final pre-order that we needed
Yeah.
to push it over the edge. Thanks, Mom.
It's like all we need is like 2,000. You were like
Right?
1,099,
I was sitting
999.
at 1999 forever. Yeah. And then Mom
Boom.
comes in clutch at the end.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Mom.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the other version of the story.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. But it's like it's good because you know, I feel like there's this like umbrella of publishers as these corporate entities and things like that. And it's like, you know, yes, they are looking at things like sales metrics and a lot of those decisions do get based on that. But then it's like you have people under the overarching umbrella who are really fighting for the authors that they believe in. It's like, you know,
Yes.
your editor who's like pushing for it day in, day out and that kind of thing. And that's the kind of stuff that for me is like, you know, I do with my book, like I want to go into traditional publishing. Not that I lack knowledge to do self-publishing, but more so it's like I got a kid and like time and stuff and
Yeah,
energy.
it's so
And
much like extra work on the front end for
yeah.
the author to do self-pub. Yes.
Yeah. And then for me to continue doing this podcast and everything like that, it's like it makes me feel really good to hear stories where it's like, you know, there is soul within these publishers and it's really
Yes.
that's something to really cherish, I think. And for
For
you, you know,
sure.
what are some other stressors or challenges that came up, but also on this sort of note of like the people with soul and heart who are kind of fighting for the authors, like what are some bright moments that you experienced throughout your journey as a debut author now that you're going towards book number 2 and you don't get to be in this debut category anymore, just like get out
Right?
of here.
I'm not a cool, flashy debut anymore. I'm just a
Yeah.
boring old regular person.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll start with the challenges and then we can cheer it up with the bright moments. We've
Yeah.
already kind of talked about some of the challenges, really just the turnover of the in the pub team, which again, all of the people I interacted with were great, just so passionate about books. I feel like those are the folks that end up working in publishing.
Yeah.
Um, you know, they're just kind of beholden to the budgets and stuff that ends up being stressful and awful for them sometimes, and then they leave. um, Also, just adjusting to the slow speed of publishing was a
Mm.
challenge. However slow you think publishing moves, triple it. Like everything, it just moves so slow. It's just a very lots of silence, lots of waiting for answers, or like
Mhm.
even once you get news, lots of sitting on secret good news before you're allowed to share it. Um, you know, I'm not a patient person by nature. It has definitely become a learned skill that I now have, which again is good. It ends up being, you know, all of these things that are challenges ultimately.
Yeah.
I think are ending up making me a more well-rounded person and like a better author and marketer in general, which is ultimately good. We're
Yeah.
focusing on the bright. I will say probably the lowest part of my debut journey was actually an interaction with a different indie bookstore, not the wonderful one I am working with now.
Mhm.
Um, but I, you know, was already kind of feeling down. It was before Among Thieves had come out. I was already having like all this turnover on my pub team. I was feeling like I didn't really know what was going on because communication was slow. And it's just, it's overwhelming. If you're a debut
Mhm.
author out there and you're listening, and right now you're like, I'm supposed to be the happiest I've ever been in my life and I'm miserable. It's okay. You're
It's
okay.
normal.
You're not alone. I feel like a lot of debut authors feel like that because it's so stressful. It feels like there's so much riding on it. Like this is it. This is the pinnacle of my life. And you know, it's an exciting moment to release a debut book, but it's not the pinnacle. You're fine. It's gonna be okay. But but you know, it was in like those months right before it comes out. And so I found this indie bookstore near me and I was gonna ask them. I went in and I offered them an arc of my book, an advanced
Mhm.
copy, and was like, "Hey, I know you guys have limited shelf space. It's a pretty small store, but you know, here is an advanced copy. I'm a local author. You know, just to consider stocking this in your store."
Yeah.
And dead ass, this woman looks me in the eye and goes, "Yeah, we're not going to stock your book." And I was like, okay. And she's like, yeah, I mean, we have like no shelf space and like, it's not like you're like Nora Roberts or anything. So,
Wow.
and like literally I just felt like my soul like sink into my shoes. Like it was the most devastating experience ever. And I got home and I cried like a whole bunch, like so hard. I was like shaking and sobbing because, it feels like you're never gonna make it, right? Like
Yeah.
I know I'm not Nora Roberts, right? I'm brand new, and I just was hoping to make an envoy into,
And if I was Nora Roberts, I wouldn't fucking go. No, I'm just kidding. I
right? I
wouldn't go to
wouldn't
your
even
little.
need to be here trying to hawk it by hand,
Exactly.
right? Yeah, exactly. So that was pretty heartbreaking. And I have not been back to that bookstore since. But it's fine because now I found a new indie bookstore that rocks. So haha.
Shout out to Sidetracks.
Yeah, exactly. Sidetrack is the best. They're cool. But then actually that story has a happy ending too, because like a true millennial, I didn't tag anyone. I just like went onto Twitter and I just tweeted like, oh, this bookstore just broke my heart. Like just telling me that, basically they're never going to stock my book because I'm not Nora Roberts and like whatever. And I didn't even tag Nora Roberts, nothing, but her team reached out to me and was like, I'm so sorry that this happened to you. I'm sorry that they're using my name like this. Like, and she's
Wow.
like the sweetest human ever. And she's like, I own a bookshop. If you send me like some signed inserts, I'll put them in your copies and we'll stock it in my store. I was
Dude.
like, oh my God. So yeah, the story has a happy ending because Nora
Yeah.
Roberts is a true gem of a human.
Shout out to Nora too.
Right?
Damn.
I know, she was great. That had a happy ending, but it had a really, really sad low moment in the middle there. But yeah, we'll talk more bright moments. The people have been the bright moment of this whole journey. So very early in the process, I realized I didn't really know what I was doing and I didn't really know what was happening and what I should expect from this experience. I didn't know anyone in my
Yeah.
real life that was in the world of publishing. And so two people reached out to me on Twitter, and it's Hannah Long, HM Long, and Genevieve Gornichek. And both of them were like, hey, we're debuting. I see you're debuting next year, like in the fantasy realm. Like, should we start like a group and like just to try to connect with other debut authors? And I was like, hell yeah. So the three of us started a debut group that ended up, I think we have like 400 members in the group now. It's a lot of people.
Wow.
Across all genres, the in the adult market though, we didn't have, like the kid lit stuff, just because it's kind of a different vibe and stuff. And I think there's a separate group for authors
MJ
going
likes to
through
swear.
that. Yeah, I do. I am not, my books are not safe for children. But yeah, so we connected with a lot of those people, and I think I've made like some lifelong friends through that group, which has been great. But then like, the challenges of really having to do a little more legwork than I was maybe expecting on the marketing side. A blessing in disguise in this way too, because I got to meet so many people in the bookish community, this podcast. That now I have an awesome partner and I get to, do awesome podcasting and talk about books that I love every week with you. Like this is going to be great. And I wouldn't have had that opportunity had I not, gone through the debut experience. So, and then other like just two last little bright spots, seeing my book on a shelf at a bookstore for the first time, which has been my childhood dream. And so that was a pretty sweet moment. And then I had one reader that reached out to me and they said that they had been feeling depressed for a really long time. They'd been in like, a bad place. And the reading Among Thieves was the first time that they laughed and felt like themselves in months. And like I cried. I genuinely cried when I read that. It was just like they just added me in a tweet, I think. And then I was like, that's why we do it, right? Like that is even if my book is not, some super deep exploration on the soul or whatever, right? Like I wrote it to be fun. I wrote it with the mind that I wanted to make people laugh.
Yeah.
And that's just like the whole point, right? So mission accomplished.
That is a beautiful note to end on, MJ. I love that.
Thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll wrap it up there. But I think for anyone out there who's writing their debut or is a debut author, just keep at it, There's a
Yeah.
lot of shit that you're gonna have to deal with, but that's life, man. You have to take the hurdles as they come, and it's like I love that you have, with all the lows that you had some incredible highs, and you're learning all these lessons along the way, and I think that's really valuable for everyone who's going through this process, whether they're even beyond their debut or anything like that. I think it's a lot of good stuff to take away from your experience. So yeah, I thank you so much for sharing all that, and for anyone who is contributing to our Patreon at $10 or more, you can check out MJ's exclusive reading of chapter 1 of Thick as Thieves, which is out on July 25th. So check that out. And I'd also like to say, after this episode, MJ is going to be my co-host, so you're going to hear her every week. I'm not going to be interviewing her, but we're going to be interviewing other authors. But I'm really happy and I'm blessed to have you as my co-host as SFF Addicts continues to grow. And if you could let everyone know where they can find you on social media.
Yes, I'm so excited to be joining the team for SFF Addicts. You can find me on social media, all the big ones. So Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, at MJ Kuhn Books, all one word.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And you can also follow SFF Addicts on Twitter, Instagram, at sffaddictspod, and you can follow me on the same platforms at Adrian M. Gibson. That's it for our two-part extravaganza with MJ. And you can also tune in next week on January 22nd, where we're going to be kicking off TBR Con 2023 with Hannah M. Long.
Woohoo!
So look forward to that. And for now, keep reading, keep imagining, and we'll see you next time on SFF Addicts.